Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast with me, Ben Talon, illustrator and creativity coach, founder of the Creative Condition, artist and writer. I bring 20 years of creative industry experience and a lifelong love of creativity, a fundamental pillar of human happiness, to you through ongoing personal exploration and the shared experiences of others. You'll get a nourishing mix of creative industry professionals and people far and wide using creativity in ways that can take our learning to the next level so we can maximise our unique blend. The show's been supported from day one by Illustration X, a tremendous illustration agency representing a shining global roster of illustrators and animators over at illustrationx.com. The music for the show is by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on all good streaming services. And for everything else, for my coaching, resources and inspiration, head to thecreativecondition.com.
So there's a lot of doubt in the beginning of the project. And then as you make progress, there is more certainty and more trust that, yes, you can do this. Although there's an important caveat to this. It doesn't mean in the beginning it's the lowest, at the end it's the highest, and then there's a straight line in between. Yes, in the beginning it's the lowest, yes, at the end is the highest, but what happens in between is a series of ebbs and flows, because we encounter obstacles, and this is not, confidence and self-efficacy are not static.
Today I'm joined by Dr. Zorana Pringle. Zorana is a senior research scientist at Yale University's Centre for Emotional Intelligence, and she is also the author of the brand new and brilliant The Creativity Choice, the science of making decisions to turn ideas into action. We're talking about creative self-efficacy, we're talking confidence, we're talking about a lot of the psychology of creativity and what differentiates the people who action their ideas and sustain them throughout a fulfilling life and career, and those who give up at the first hurdle. This is the Creative Condition. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Ben Talon. This is the Creative Condition. I am the Creative Condition, damn it. How are you doing? I hope you're well. I hope you enjoyed Monday's brain dump, where I got talking about illustrators and cowboys and, just drawing parallels between the changing times and the shift of a mass populace against those who want to cling to an ideal, a love, a passion, a lifestyle. And I saw commonalities between illustrators, myself being one, who've built careers and lives on an artistic talent and their ability to imagine and create and bring joy to the lives of others through visual communication, and the rise of machines who can do that for you at a fraction of the cost. It's a reality, and I started watching Yellowstone with my wife Flora on Sunday night, and immediately the themes just smacked me across the face, and I had to just get the kettle on and talk to you guys about that. So go back and check that one out if you missed it. Do not hesitate to go back and check out recent brilliant episodes with Jessica Hish and Timothy Goodman live in Mexico, talking about the personal in our work, in our creativity. Really great contrasting points of view from Jess and Tim. It was a joy to take part in that conversation, to lead it at Paradiso. What a great festival that was. Go and have a look at it. It's fantastic. Started by Hector Ayuso, who founded and ran Off Festival for a couple of decades, 24 years, I think. In the end, I wrote Hector's biography, The Reason You're Doing It, which we launched at the inaugural Paradiso in Mexico last year. Also, Tyler Schlossberg spoke at the festival, and I had her on a full-length episode as we caught up later on, so that's a big one. She's very popular, and Tyler is she's wonderful. She's got such a brain. I love hearing from her, and I love her writing, I love her art, I love her motion work. So go and listen to that one too. Lots to catch up on The Creative Condition, and a thank you to those who make it possible. illustrationx.com is where you can find my founding sponsor, Illustration X. They've been here since the very advent of this show. It wouldn't be possible without them. They continue to support it. It's been over a decade. You cannot put a price on that. They're awesome. So how are you guys? How have you been feeling? How's your creativity? Have you been getting bogged down by the times? Have you been getting some resilience to deal with that? it's a path that I've been on for a few years now, since early parenthood, when I really struggled in those first couple of years. It was during lockdown. It was absolutely exhausting raising two small babies as a twin parent. And I wasn't so bad at the start, but what I found as that exhaustion set in for the long stay, that I love the parenthood. I love my work. I was very happy in my life. What I really struggled with was my insurmountables. Now, this is a big thing that I kick off with my coaching clients, is to address and identify their insurmountables, and that is the things that we feel we have no direct control over, but that trouble us. So for me, the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis, of course, very much intertwined, were giving me such lows and such a frequency of fight or flight instincts, as in full panic, anxiety, heart rate through the roof, exhausted and really, really quite despondent at times, not my usual self. I had to do something about that. So I set off on this kind of track of desperate research into my cognitive function and seeking to understand my brain in a way that I hadn't previously, so that I could potentially get some control over that. And that was a really important thing for me. So I want to hear from you guys. How have you been with that? I recommend Stutz to a lot of people, a fantastic documentary on Netflix, but it's about psychotherapist Phil Stutz, and it takes us through the kind of states of mind which we get ourselves into and take ourselves down rabbit holes. So being under the cloud, so to speak, walking around lost in our thoughts, and all of those thoughts negative, which become self-fulfilling and take us deeper, deeper down. And I know we can all relate to that as sensitive artists who are vulnerable people, because we care about the world and it's tough out there. So if that's troubling you, I recommend that one. I also recommend Now Is Better by Stefan Sagmeister. If you want to go back through the archives, you can listen to my interview with Stefan about that. I also interviewed Stefan live at Off Festival 2024 about optimism and about reframing our view of the world and our processing of the news and media that we're bombarded with in today's world. So go and have a look at those as starting points, and you can also have a look at the reading list at thecreativecondition.com. I put that up there to help inform your creativity, but there are books on there that will just help you as a human being, because that's what this work is. It's as much about the human condition as it is creativity. It's just that my focal point is creativity. But really, the foundations of all of my coaching work, all of my writing, all of my work, this podcast, is about the human condition and helping people to be the best human that they can, to be happy so that they're able to create. Anyway, that's enough of that. So on today's show, we're back with the guests, and I've got the wonderful Zorana Pringle. I keep skipping her surname. I think it's Ivachevich, but even that's probably butchering it, so I go first name, surname. And she's written an awesome book, which appeared on my radar, The Creativity Choice, The Science of Making Decisions, to turn ideas into action. I'll read you the blurb. It's really, really great. It comes highly recommended. I need to get that added this morning, actually, to the Creative Condition reading list. Hopefully by the time this episode comes out, I will have got my finger out and done that. But here's the blurb. Anyone who has ever participated in a brainstorming session will know that most of us do not lack ideas. Yet many people never breathe life into these ideas. To turn inspiration into real achievement, you must decide to act, and then decide to act again and again, despite obstacles, until your thoughts take shape and come to life. This is what psychologist Zorana Ivachevich Pringle calls the creativity choice. Drawing on decades of research into the science of creativity, the creativity choice teaches you how to bring ideas out of your mind and into the world, with stories ranging from an entrepreneur who built a national non-profit, to a YouTuber who turned a hobby into a professional career, to a business leader who established a company culture of innovation. Pringle illuminates how people can make creative ideas happen. She shows what it takes to get started, the psychological and emotional tools needed to navigate the creative process, and the social conditions that allow creativity to succeed. Through this book, you'll learn how to bridge the gap between having the first spark of an idea and actually doing something with it. And it's absolutely brilliant because, like I said at the top of the show, Zorana is a senior research scientist at Yale University's Centre for Emotional Intelligence. What a job. I asked her a little bit about that. What a job to get to study creativity scientifically. I asked a little while back a few friends about kind of funding opportunities to do this sort of thing, to get some support to do it, because I'm a little bit lost on the credits when it comes to that stuff. Something I'd love to do more of through the Creative Condition. So if any of you guys do know about funding models and about grants and about how you can make something like that possible without signing everything away or, having to do that in such a boxed way, then I would love to hear from you, because this is something I'm truly passionate about. And if you can't tell that by now, if you're a long-term listener, then well, I'm not doing my job well. So I hope you enjoy this one, guys. Big thank you to illustrationx.com. If you're interested in working with me on a coaching basis, one-to-one through the pit stop, or group sessions if you're an agency, or through talks, there are many ways that we can shape this. Let's have that conversation and check it out at thecreativecondition.com/coach. Please consider supporting the Ukrainian Institute, who do amazing work supporting the Ukrainian creative community in a horrific time of war. You can help them out by visiting ui.org.ua, sharing some of their work, commissioning them, just shouting about it, telling a friend. Lots of ways you can do that, and these guys need it. Their optimism, their productivity, their creativity during this time of war is nothing short of life-affirming. It's that inspiring. Anyway, that's enough of that. I'm going to take you to my conversation with Zorana. If you get a chance, rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend about the show. I would really appreciate it. Enjoy this one.
You've seen all of my crazy strategies of keeping my life together. Make sure you have all your alarms set, because I can get distracted and yeah.
Oh God, yeah. No, I have to work. I have to constantly work on my organization.
I have just essentially given up. I'm like, some people are not organized people. I'm going to make sure that I do things that need to be done, but it's going to be clumsy.
Yeah, that's exactly it. 18 years I've been doing this, and I've yet to find a cohesive, like you say, I do my accounts. I've never missed a deadline, but my files, my space. Oh.
At some point, I tried to just teach myself, and this did not
Nope.
end up working in a graceful way.
First of all, if you'd be happy to paint me a picture of childhood, I always find it really fascinating to see where a person's come from.
Yeah. So I grew up on a very small island in the Croatian Adriatic, Vis. It's an island that at the time had about 2,000 people. Now it has fewer than that. And there were two towns, still there are two towns. And I was growing up in a small place called Komija. And I actually became, in a way, fascinated by creativity at that time. I never thought of it. I'm not even sure that the word was in my vocabulary, to be honest with you, if I look back. But I distinctly remember in the first grade, our teacher gave us a draw anything you want assignment. And I was in full panic mode. I had no idea what to do. And I really like drawing. And I did it all the time at home. But I did not know what to do, because my first thought was, well, what is expected? What will the teacher want? And the only thing I could think of to do was to look what everybody else was doing. So I did that, and everybody else was doing exact same thing. So I proceeded to do the exact same thing, and that was the occasion for the drawing was a national holiday. So, town square, Venetian fort, flags flying, that's it. And the teacher put all these drawings on the board later on, and I realized that out of 22, I think, children, 21 did the same thing, and one was different. And that was my best friend. And I did not know what she had that we didn't, or I didn't, but I wanted what she had, in the when Harry met Sally kind of way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, because, and that's, that never changes, does it? It should, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you end up remembering some things. And actually, I talked a few years ago. I talked to this girl then, woman now, and how important that event was in my life. And she did not, of course, remember it because it was an event in my life, not hers.
These are very fun. It's funny you should say that. I have a book of short fiction that I haven't released yet, and there's a story in there about a lad called Thomas Shackleton who I met in the first year of secondary school, and he had that exact same impact on me. And everyone sort of arrived with the same sports branded bags and the black shoes, and of course the school uniform. And this guy had a kind of satchel, and I remember he'd hand painted the band James, their logo, onto the back. And he had these curtains, and just there was an aura of inner authority and self confidence in him that just blew me away. Like I didn't understand. I hadn't seen that in a kid my own age at this point. So yeah, I had that moment too, and I was always drawn to his aura because of that. Um, I guess, just not to jump in too deep too soon, but I guess that speaks to people's idea of confidence as something that is kind of innate or gifted to some, which is not the case, of course. It's about momentum and proving to ourselves. That's something you touch upon in the book, along with other things that are built through momentum. Did you? I'm jumping too far ahead in your story, but were you always drawn to that from that point on? Like, what role did that play in your life as you began to grow older from that time?
I became aware of it. It's not that, at age 6, I decided what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I'm not sure that quite happens. It's certainly not to me. But I became aware of it, and I would recognize it when it happened or where I encountered it. So it became something that is now in my consciousness that otherwise might not have been. And I really find it fascinating how you're connecting it to confidence and what happens to confidence. And especially when we have these early experiences, it might seem that confidence comes to some people and doesn't come to others. It's not silly to believe that, right? When you encounter it so early, but it really doesn't.
That's it. The best definition I heard of it was by a previous guest on this show, a psychologist called Kimberly Wilson, and she described it as the brain's ability to predict a positive outcome. And I thought that was fantastic because that dispels this idea of it being something, some form of genius. So preordained, whereas actually it's not. It's about proof and it's about doing, which is a major theme in your book. Before we get into the book, would you mind just giving us a snapshot of what you do today and how you got into that?
Well, I am a research scientist. I'm a senior research scientist at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and I study creativity. I study creativity in all its forms. So I am interested in creativity in the learning process and in our everyday life and in professional settings. And I'm interested in creativity done by individuals and what are the social influences that create that infrastructure or an ecosystem that makes it possible.
Wow, well, I mean that it sounds incredible. It's safe to say you must love it. I mean, the book really sings.
I do love it, and it's a little bit funny when people say, "Oh, that sounds interesting," because my reaction is kind of to giggle with excitement and, yeah, isn't that fascinating? How did I come across this? The best thing to study ever.
So what was there? Was there a spark for this book, or was this a gradual byproduct of the work you were already doing?
A little bit of both, to be honest with you. So there was a spark. There was a spark a number of years ago. A colleague of mine who I came to pay attention to, when she says something, it makes me think. And she said in a casual conversation about something totally different, you should write a book. Very seriously. She has written books before. successfully, and it made me think about it. My first reaction coming back to that idea of confidence was, I cannot write a book. And because the book sounds something rather monumental in my mind, it still does, but then I would not let it go. I have really learned to pay attention to what people say and to try to figure out why they are saying it. Are they saying it just to say it? Usually people don't. And she was saying it because she saw something that I might not have at the time. And then gradually I started considering it and it started to evolve. And, it took time, but here we are.
Mm. Yeah, it's a funny, the book writing process I find very fascinating. I've had different experiences across the books that I've written. So why did you want this book to exist in terms of what would you hope for this book to achieve? Because I went through phases of, because I have a book called The Creative Condition, which there are some similarities along the way with the topics we're dealing with in our two, which was great to see. And I found that, there would be times when I had these kind of lofty ideas of, I want, because personally, all of the driving force behind this work, perhaps it didn't start out as this, it started out as just curiosity around creativity. But as time has gone on, this has been 15 years of my own study on this now, is very much, I know as a species, we always have needed creativity. But I think that with the collective challenges we face, we really are not making the most of creativity. It is still not prized in our education the way it should, in our societies the way it should. And I just found that really sad because it's brought so much colour to my life. So I'd love to just hear what what you would hope for your book in a similar vein.
I very much agree with what you said. We need to value it more. We need to arrange our education around it more. My personal reason for writing the book was, well, I oftentimes am motivated by frustration. I find something frustrating and then I think it should be done better. I think it should be done differently. And at some point, I decide, okay, I will do it. And it was a little bit like that. It was realizing that, in my opinion, a lot of books out there were missing something. And this is not to say there are no good books on creativity. They certainly are. But I did not see enough of talking about creativity beyond coming up with ideas. Creativity is problem solving. Creativity is thinking. It is all of those things, and we need to know about all of those things. But creativity that takes an idea and makes it into something tangible, a performance or a product, is long, it's difficult. What is difficult is emotional, it's challenging. How do we deal with this side of creativity so that we don't give up along the way and that we don't take an easier and more commonplace route along the way? So I saw my role and my hope for the book to uncover this part of the creative process, to equip people to deal with that long and challenging part.
And it does a wonderful job of that. It's very accessible, which you speak about in the book, the need to make, to create a book that is accessible. It's fascinating. It's my perfect kind of balance. I love books that have that balance of anecdotal experience and, of course, brilliant scientific research too. I just, that I could, those sort of books that flip me between the two are a real joy. And I like that early on, you really address the idea that creativity is hard work, because it absolutely is. Some days, some weeks, I sit here thinking, oh God, 18 years in, I'm sat there thinking, what? Why? Why did I choose this road? This is difficult. There are barriers everywhere. But that is the very nature of things, isn't it? You speak of frustration there, and there's some glorious stories of people who made great things, invented, innovated, imagined, all because they came up against something on the negative emotion spectrum, which I'm, again, a big believer in.
Yeah, it is. it we don't talk enough about these so-called negative emotions. Sometimes in science, uh, term sticks because of historical reasons, and negative versus positive emotions stuck because of historical reasons. They are not negative, they are not positive, they are more pleasant or less pleasant or unpleasant, but that doesn't make them positive or negative in terms of how useful they are or how beneficial they are. All emotions in different ways can be helpful or even hurtful.
Yeah, I like the term granularity that you use in there too. So that's lovely, and it reminded me of there's something I do because I work also as a creativity coach, and I always end up working with my clients on a personality basis with this same idea in mind. And I the way within my own framework, I call it the duality of everything. And I don't know if you're familiar with the game Top Trumps, the card game.
No.
It's a very simple interface, and you get a version that's Star Wars or football or whatever else, and it's traits. So they'll be ranked. For example, fantasy version might have magic, strength, various things, and there is a number between 1 and 10, 10 being good, one being terrible. And I ask my clients to pull out a few personality traits they might consider overtly negative or a flaw or something as a shining light and a real strength, and then to consider the complete flip of that. So to assign a number to it. And in my own instance, as an illustrator, I use my clumsiness and my haphazardness. We mentioned it briefly earlier within
Yeah.
an organizational. I would have ranked that as a maybe a 1 or a 2 in terms of whatever that might be. But then to flip it, it's also the genesis of my art style. It's a very raw and rugged, and everything that I create is. So I get people to look at different traits and look at the flip side value on the same basis there as the granularity of emotions. And once you start to do that, like you say, very quickly, nothing is overtly negative, nothing is overtly positive. And what it does is it gives you a toolkit, and actually it gives you a degree of control. Is that something you agree with?
Yeah, I do, and it's interesting that you are mentioning this because this characteristic of creative individuals has been identified in personality research, where we found that they seem to embody, creative individuals seem to embody what is usually opposite. So they can be introverted, but also extroverted at times. They can have this flipping between the two. They are very serious about their work, but can also be playful about it. They can sometimes seem very naive, almost childlike, but also have a very deep understanding of what they are doing. And the list goes on like that. And you are also mentioning it in the context of well, what is a strength and what is a weakness? It is not straightforward.
Yeah, and that's the nature of life, isn't it? Very complex. That was actually was one of the very um, earliest attractions to creativity that I had, and I had never recognized it as so much like you as a 6-year-old didn't
Mhm.
recognize, the interest in your friend doing something different. But growing up in a small working class mill town, it was full of strong characters and interesting people, and I was always drawn to the contradictions in those people. And I still write about that to this day in my fiction, in my non-fiction.
Mhm.
And that is what makes people interesting. And in today's world, there's far too much black and white and kind of typecasting or a lack of appreciation for nuance. Where actually, the moment I walked into art school, it's full of contradiction, and I loved all of that.
I think that's the fun part of it. I remember way back when I was an undergrad having this idea that I wanted to study interesting people. And of course, when you are a scientist, you cannot say you want to study interesting people because that's not a concept. And one way of getting into it was, well, creative people are interesting. So how about I study them?
Yes, absolutely. Um, they very much are. I loved your work in the book about broader interests and about the kind of the dynamic lived experience and the need to feed our ideas and creativity with a broad experience and doing different things. It's something that I see many either of my peers or students that I work with not doing. They get very hung up on the discipline or the field that they've chosen to go into, and therefore put this very unnecessary box around it. Love you to tell us a little bit more about that, if you could.
I have noticed a similar thing too in my own field. So in scientific research, we go to conferences, and I have noticed that a lot of my colleagues and a lot of people I know go only to see those talks that are directly relevant for their work. But how are you going to expand your work if you only stay there? And so I deliberately don't. And that's why I like some conferences which have very broad focus. Um, so we have found, research has found that broad interests and exposure to different experiences is really enriching what we do, no matter what the discipline. And we can find examples in pretty much anything. So I love the example of Salvador Dali. His lots of what he did, and almost all what he did, was directly influenced by his interest in science. He subscribed to scientific journals. His studio was full of them. He actually read them. It was not just for show. He would write notes on the margins, and we could see what they are. And in the early part of his career, it was all about psychology and psychotherapy, and he wanted to show that these ideas about the unconscious through his art. And then later on, physics, nuclear physics. He read that matter is made of small particles that are very minuscule, but then a lot of empty space in between them. And if you see his later works, there are these bubbles that show physical objects, and then they are floating in space as if to simulate, to portray in some concrete way that idea of empty space that matter is made of. On the flip side, scientists, an analysis of Nobel Prize scientists in physics and chemistry, many of them, incredible number of them, had hobbies in the arts. This is important. It is our culture is pushing us towards specialization, and there's nothing wrong in specialization per se, but we have to get ideas and perspectives and richness from somewhere, and that breadth is providing it.
That's very true. And I read a wonderful book recently called Filter World by Kyle Chaker, who writes for The New Yorker. And it's very much looking at how the algorithm has funneled and flattened creativity in certain ways and narrowed that. And to the same reason, for those very same reasons, if we all go to the same resources and the same, points of inspiration, very quickly we're going to see a amalgamation of all these things, which is damaging for creativity, but at the same time does also create a great opportunity for bigger ideas and different things. But exactly to your point, that does require some effort from the person who wishes to create to fertilize the mind much more.
Yeah. We have new tools, but it matters how we use those tools.
Yeah, perfectly put. I loved the 4 types of creativity. I've never come across those, the big C in there. Would you mind just giving us a quick rundown of those? Because I found it very useful actually to look at them in that way, but especially when I'm describing creativity to other people, it gave me this lovely framework.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because oftentimes when we hear the word creativity, our first association is gigantic, monumental works of art, science, invention, from Steve Jobs to Pablo Picasso to anybody of the sort. And they are obviously clearly creative. There's nothing to discuss there, but the story doesn't end there. So scientists really look at creativity at 4 levels. That level of genius or eminent creativity is what we call big C creativity. But we can go all the way down to something we call mini C creativity. And that is creative thinking, insights, associations between things that are not obviously associated, that we come up with in the learning process. To just give you an example to wrap your mind around a really abstract concept, and to use myself, when I was a kid, I had to learn long lists of Latin words, and I did not want to do that. And this was a while ago, not to want to date myself. And so I invented this strategy of recording myself on the tape recorder. So I would say the word in one language, then I would pause, say it in the other, and then play it back to myself and test myself. And it was effective. And it was original in the sense that nobody taught me this. It was something new that I did to help myself learn. It's not groundbreaking. It's not, probably I wasn't even the first one in the world to invent it, but it was meaningful and on a personal level. And then on the next level, we have little c creativity, which is creativity in everyday life and relationships, everyday actions. Does not necessarily require a lot of skill. So if we like to do watercolors as a hobby, does not matter so much how good we are. It is for us. It is for people we love. I have an aunt who does watercolors of birds and puts them on Christmas cards. That is an example of little c creativity. And sometimes what starts as a hobby, what starts as a little thing in life can grow into something more professional. And we can find beautiful examples of that. And that brings us to the next level of professional creativity, which requires expertise. Now, something that maybe started as a hobby or maybe started as a profession, you are building the skills, you are learning about it, you are getting deeper into an area of expertise, and you can do something that you get paid for. You can do something that gets recognition. Um, it might not be changing the nature of art like Picasso's work did, or give us a new kind of phone and change phone design forever, but it is important in its own context.
Mm. Um, yes, I mean, again, because it's that. I mean, when people, I do a talk about all this, and I look at the time when we begin to surrender that very pure curiosity that we have as children, and I call it the maturity trap because I think it starts to happen around adolescence, particular maybe even sooner. But particularly, I heard one person describe it as when we're asked to color inside the lines,
Mhm.
and and there's something about when we hit adolescence, and it becomes much more about being acceptance and society and fitting in, and that's when we kind of start to surrender that. Then we start to encounter exams and academic pressure, and it's then I think that we start to think of creativity as either very much hobbying or the sharp end of it all, like you said, the Steve Jobs, the big C stuff. And that's a real shame because there's immense value of everything in between, and even those who are still practicing it don't recognize it as such. And I suppose that speaks to the misconceptions around creativity, that it is just artistic talent, which of course it's, you and I know well, it's much bigger than that. Creative self-efficacy was a brilliant term. It's something that I'd been referring to as inner authority until I read that term.
Mm.
If you could tell us a little about that. There's a great story about Elizabeth O'Byron in the book that you share. It's it's brilliant.
Thank you. Scientists, psychologists have been studying self-efficacy in different contexts. So what self-efficacy means is the belief that you can do something, that you are capable of doing it, that you have the necessary ability to do so. And it can be studied for different kinds of tasks. You can study it and, can you do this math test? And you can study it, can you do this creative project? And so creative self-efficacy is specific to creativity. And you mentioned Elizabeth's story. She was an academic. She got her PhD. She was always a good student. She was on the track to be a professor. And then, life happens, and she ended up working at the research institute in her free time as a side project with best friends from high school, started an app, Get to Know Your Friends app, developed it, had several versions of it, did not quite work in a way of becoming a professional thing, but learned a lot from it. And then working at the research institute, had an opportunity to start a nonprofit, educational nonprofit, was encouraged by, based on her interests and based on her expertise from the director of the research center. Did not ever think of herself as an entrepreneur, but then said, well, I did this app. It was a fun project, but then perhaps I can do this, had support. And one thing, perhaps I can do it, led to another thing of, well, I did something for it, therefore I can do the next task and the next one. And now it's a national nonprofit.
Yes, and it goes back to confidence also, doesn't it? It's intertwined with that idea of creating a track record for yourself. And I recently wrote my first biography, and it was written in the form of a short story. And that maybe wouldn't happen. It probably almost certainly wouldn't have happened 5 years prior. I first had to, be brave enough to try fiction after writing a book about creativity. Did that for a little while. Feedback happens. The feedback's good. I do more, so on, so on. And then I'm asked to do a biography by someone who's very trusting creatively and loved the fiction I wrote, and he wanted something different, didn't want to tell his story in an interview format again. So I was very much in the deep end, and it was kind of, here's my story, over to you and your creativity. That happened at a time in my career when I had the creative self-efficacy to work that out and think, well, okay, doesn't matter that I haven't written a biography before, I can do it my way. And that's a succession of trust over the years. It's a wonderful feeling when that happens. But you also talk about that in the terms of the arc of a project or a piece of work, which I thought was fantastic. And the idea that we are almost the most fragile at the beginning of a new project. Am I thinking of that right?
Yeah, you're thinking of it right. And if you stand back for a second and ask, okay, why could that be? It makes sense, right? At the beginning of the project, if you're doing something creative, by its very definition, you haven't done it before, because creativity is something that is in one way or another original. So even if it is original just for you, you haven't done it before. So there's uncertainty related to it. You cannot be absolutely sure that you can do it because, well, you cannot point to something you have done in the past and say, well, I've done it then, therefore I can do it now. So there's a lot of doubt in the beginning of the project. And then as you make progress, there is more certainty and more trust that, yes, you can do this. Although there's an important caveat to this. It doesn't mean in the beginning it's the lowest, at the end it's the highest, and then there's a straight line in between. Yes, in the beginning it's the lowest. Yes, at the end is the highest. But what happens in between is a series of ebbs and flows, because we encounter obstacles, and this is not confidence and self-efficacy are not static. It's not that either you have it or you don't have it, or you have it at 70% or 100%. It varies depending on what's going on.
And I have to believe that with that information, a person would be more inclined to power on and look for solutions as opposed to feeling defeated and maybe giving up.
I completely agree, because, well, what if you start a project and you are about to start a project or you're considering of starting it, and you say, well, I don't really feel confident. I'm not so 100% sure that I can do it. Well, maybe the next thought is, maybe I don't do it at all. Maybe I just don't have what it takes. But if you know that this is not static and it's something that develops, then you can say, okay, I have just enough in my tank to make it to the next stop where I'm going to refill. And when you encounter an obstacle or a creative block or get in a rut, then say to yourself, well, this is temporary. This is not a sign that I cannot do it in general. It just happens that right now, in this instant, is not working.
Yes, and again with evaluation, people, you speak of this too, but the idea that someone settles on the first idea and it will invariably not be as strong as second or third idea, or develop iteration of said idea. That's something that intrigues me, and we're all guilty of it because in today's world, we live at 1,000 miles an hour. Patience is short because budgets are tight and all these other reasons, and that creates a lot of pressure, time pressure for people. So I guess that's something that I would like to contribute my own efforts in helping businesses understand, that people need time to evaluate, to come up with the best idea, and the psychological safety that comes with that. Do you think that's something that we need to work on in today's world?
Oh, very much so. When you mentioned education before, now you mentioned business, and I think we have to talk on both ends. When I talk to my son, who's 15, at that age where it's really important to fit in, when I talk to him about creativity, the thing that I stress the most is, if there's only one thing you're going to get about creativity, it is that first ideas are not the best. And when you said businesses, there was recently this fantastic study where researchers accessed a database with more than 1.2 million job records. Records about companies, not just jobs, but companies. And out of these 1.2 million, they identified more than 38,000 startups. And what they wanted to see is which startups are going to survive and thrive and grow. So they now were able to follow through time at which point startups start to scale up. And they have seen a dramatic influence of the time of scaling up. If you scale up in the first 6 months to 1 year, you are less likely to succeed than if you scale up 2 years after founding. And the difference is dramatic. 20 to 40% higher success rate, higher survival rate if you scale 2 years or more after founding. And when they looked at why that is, it is because people in that time have engaged in exploration, have resisted that temptation to go with the first idea that works, first idea that seems reasonable, and then experimented, did testing, A versus B of a feature, what is going to work best, and didn't do just one of those, but really explored it. And it's very hard because it seems that you are not responding to the time pressures. But if you take the longer term view, you are going to be more successful in the long term. Now, the question is, what do you value more and what do you want more?
Yeah, and I draw a line there between that and advice that I sometimes give to younger designers and artists that are coming out of graduation. And some will look for agency representation right off the bat, and I encourage them not to do that, because I think those first few years where you cut your teeth and you learn to understand and find, build your own brand and your own voice, I think the longer you can do that and the purer you can build that brand, the better chance you're going to be taken on by a representative that understands you more, that will enable your creativity more. And then with that voice, you will trust it and be more passionate, and all of those things will give you a heightened chance of longer term success. I think that's a very similar thing.
Yes, very much so. It is saying take time to explore, and then things are going to happen in the long run.
Yeah, I think so. And intrinsic motivation versus external goals, rewards. That was great. I love that part of the book because it's something that, and I say this too sometimes if I approach an agency and I suggest the idea of working with them as a coach. One of the first things they come back with, they'll look at my framework and go, "But you do realize we work with commercial clients?" I say, "Yes, of course. I've worked with commercial clients my entire career for 18 years." My point is that if you have energized people who are autonomous, driven, passionate, they have broader interests than just this job, you will have better employees, better ideas within the framework of your business. Is that something close to this idea of intrinsic motivation?
It is exactly the idea of intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is doing something because you are enjoying it, because you find it challenging and meaningful, and you are going to do better work when, because you're going to be more invested, personally invested, when you have this kind of motivation. This sometimes gets a little bit twisted when people talk about it in the sense that, oh, this is the only thing that matters. Of course, it's not the only thing that matters. If you have all the intrinsic motivation in the world and you are not paid anything, well, you have to survive somehow. So this does not negate the importance of compensation, importance of rewards and respect and that comes from it. And actually, at times of creative work really needs to rely a little bit on those rewards to get you through the process, because there are parts of the creative process that are not energizing, that are boring or frustrating. I'm a scientist, and in science, you conduct research and then you write it up, submit it for publication, but then it goes for peer review. And this process of peer review can be really difficult. You get feedback. Sometimes you don't agree with the feedback. It is a struggle to deal with it. Nobody likes it. In ideal circumstances, this peer review process makes everything better. And that oftentimes works. Of course, not always. Nothing works always. But it is painful, and you have to somehow make it through. So intrinsic motivation is crucial for creativity, but rewards and acknowledgement of work is also important and a way to get you through those less than pleasant times.
That's very true. I often find that I will be more driven and connected with my personal lines of inquiry when I've got the right balance of that and commercial work, because otherwise financial pressure creeps in and that can be very damaging emotionally. Or lack of self-worth can be a thing. It's one thing sitting in my little garden studio alone when I'm working for clients and I've got things going on in different areas. But if it's just my own stuff and there's no work there and I'm alone in my garden studio, that can bring a whole raft of emotions that can be quite damaging too.
Yes, exactly. And there's nothing wrong with commercial work. Sometimes people talk of commercial work as if it was less worthy. Uh, it is not, and it is challenging in its own ways, and it can be stimulating creative juices, if you want to be metaphorical, in very interesting ways that can be inspirational for other things, because you have to work with constraints. You have to work under conditions that maybe are not fully of your own choosing, and it stretches you. So it teaches you a lot about how to work creatively.
Mm. And, and in terms of passions, so this has very much become my leading passion in my life now. This working to elevate creativity's role in our societies and our cultures. Has it also become your passion? I'm interested in whether that's the case.
Yeah, very much so. And that is part of the reason that, well, most of the reason that I have written the book. I have noticed that, in my opinion, something was missing from the books that were out there, but I thought it was important to have it, and I thought it was important to provide people with the knowledge, understanding of what the creative process looks like, so that when you encounter obstacles, you recognize that this is a normal part of the process. Everybody goes through it. Steve Jobs went through it. If you read accounts of the invention of the first iPhone, they had a completely done product, and he decided to not release it and completely start from scratch. So they had, even people of this stature had times of creative block or times of getting in a rut or failure. And if you understand the nature of the creative process, that's part of it and not a signal that you are not capable, not able to do it yourself.
Yeah. Yes. Because yeah, and I love that idea that passion is not something that's already there, but something we encounter in the world. I think that will be game changing to a lot of people because, when you wrote about this idea that people are kind of going, well, why haven't I got a passion, or what, what's my thing? And it's like, well, I don't know, go out and find out. That's a lovely idea, and when I think of anything I'm passionate about in my life, I encountered it, and I think the innate part of that is more to do with something that's there in your makeup as a human, and it's something that becomes activated by encountering your passion.
Yeah, it is. People have this idea, it seems to be intuitive, that we find our passion, that it's kind of dormant, and we just have to create the circumstances to find something that already exists. And under certain circumstances, that seems to make sense, especially when we are talking about artistic kinds of creativity. You were always interested in it. There was always this artistic streak in a person, and now seems to have come to blossom, and you have found your passion. But it doesn't really work if you go beyond that. If we say creativity is not just the arts, and people can become passionate about anything. The thing is that we really learn to become passionate about something by trying things out, by giving a chance to something that could be an interest that you didn't know it was an interest. My son has now been singing in a choir for 4 years. When he was in elementary school, and I would describe that as a passion. But when he was in elementary school, he hated, with a burning passion, his music class. But he started middle school, decided to give choir a chance as a way to satisfy the music requirement, fell in love because of giving it a chance. Think of other examples. Think of things that you would never think of somebody could be passionate about, right? Because it doesn't conform to this idea of it's already in you. To give you an example that was really beautiful to me, we recently did some work on our house. And one of those kinds of works that you spend a lot of money and then you don't see anything because it's just repairing things. We have a kind of containing wall that holds the front part of the garden, and it's stonework. So we had to get it rebuilt. It was starting to crumble. We found a person working on walls, and he did a great job, and we ended up chatting with him, and he's really passionate about building stone walls. You never think, oh, I'm going to discover a passion for building stone walls because it's innate in me. And his story is really interesting because, of course, we ended up chatting, and he is originally from Turkey. And every summer he goes back to Turkey, and he goes to a different archaeological location to study how stone walls were built through centuries.
Wow.
Isn't that passion? But there's learning there. There is there is value and love for your craft. There is doing something new in ways that are effective. That is the definition of creativity. But he was not born with it. He developed it from experience of where he was, who he knew, what were the models around him.
Yes, and you know it's funny. I've learned my next door neighbor. He's 82 now, and I learned that his career was very well respected in aero engineering, but now now that he's retired, his passion he has this amazing collection of 17th century glass. Again, like that's you wouldn't know that. And I lived next door to the guy for 3 years before I learned that. So I went round for a cup of coffee, and he shows me all this. He's giving me this fragments of a glass that was around at the time of Isaac Newton, and then we're talking about the invention of that era and just how creative that was. And so of course, I'm thinking, oh God, I need to interview my next door neighbor now. This is absolutely fascinating. But again, it's great, and that leads me on to a part of the book which is looking at community and collaboration and just how beneficial that is to creativity, because I really believe it's contagious and it's a collective condition.
I completely agree. And I think that creativity is social, even when it doesn't seem to be. I wrote a book just myself, me sitting with my computer at the local bookstore, cafe, much of the time. And it seems it's a solitary activity, and we perceive it as such, and we talk about it as if it is. But writing a book means interacting with people in direct or indirect ways. In indirect ways by reading literature, research done by others, in direct ways by interviewing people, by talking to colleagues and developing ideas through that. So we have those relationships even when we are doing something solitary. But if we are doing creative work in the context of organizations, then what happens is that the social aspect creates essentially an ecosystem that is either supportive of creativity or not.
Yes, very much so. And I like your mentioning of weak ties. Also, I love that idea, and it's something I feature in my talk. I use the term like-minded people and say you have to find a balance with that, because if you only move exclusively towards the people you consider like-minded people or your tribe, I think you cut off so many opportunities to learn new ideas. Again, my next door neighbor, case in point, I did not expect to be having a cup of coffee with him talking about that glassware. But now that I have, not only does that give me new ideas for my fiction, it's like I want to interview him. But most importantly, I'm also just illuminated by his passion for his thing. That, to me, that kind of tribal, nerdy, whatever you want to call it, that is magic to me, pure magic.
Exactly. To me, it feels like life force. And I know I'm a scientist, and this is a very metaphorical and very, colorful term. But sometimes we need them to truly convey the energy of something. And what you are hinting there at is, how do we get new ideas? New ideas that are going to be really creative, that give us new perspective on something, oftentimes come from interactions with what you refer to as weak ties, relationships that don't necessarily even feel like relationships, but connections with people at the edges of our networks, people we don't often talk to, people who are just friends of friends or colleagues of colleagues that we got connected to kind of circuitously. And the reason why they can give us perspectives is exactly because we don't talk to them at all times. So we don't know their perspectives already. Our close colleagues, our tribe is our tribe because we already are on the same page. So they are not going to really give us new ideas. Chances are, sometimes they will, but they are much less likely to.
Yeah, and often when you get new ideas from those people, it's because they've got new ideas from those weak ties too, and it's it
Yeah,
feeds
exactly.
in.
But Another thing that we have to remember if we, in talking about creativity, we oftentimes come back to coming up with ideas. Yes, it's important, but then also matters what you do with those ideas. And now when you say, I have an idea, maybe you got it from interaction with that weak tie. And that doesn't have to be directly that they gave it to you. It can be something got sparked. Now you have to develop it. And there, your tribe, your strong ties are going to be the way to develop it. They are going to not say, oh, here's another idea, but because they care about you, they are going to say, oh, that's cool. Yes, and did you think of this? Can you add that? And they help you elaborate on it and build it.
Yes. Yes, I think so. It's balance always is one of the big lessons, of your work, my work, of creativity in general. I think it's always the treading that middle line and making the good of all those different opposing forces, so to speak. And maybe not opposing, but just the variation.
Yeah, exactly. And it is not even the middle line, it is zigzagging from one side to another. So it is going from, okay, I'm coming up with ideas, I'm reaching to people who I don't talk to all the time. And then you are going to the other side and saying, well, now I'm talking to people who I talk to all the time because I need a different kind of help.
Yeah, that's it. And so now that the creativity choice is out, congratulations, by the way. What's next? Are you setting out on a promotional tour, or are you continuing your work, or a bit of both?
Both and all of the above. I think the answer in psychology that could be an answer to every question is all of the above. Because people are complicated and it's never an either or thing. But yes, I'm still a scientist. I still do research. And my big interest is how we get from here to there. What is that process of developing an idea? And how do we communicate it effectively?
Mm. Well, it's a wonderful book, so thank you for writing it. And yeah, let's keep in touch. I'm very keen to hear what you do next, where you are.
Thank you very much.
I can't recommend The Creativity Choice any higher. It is incredible. It's a great book. It's truly game-changing. It is so informative. The science side of all of this is fascinating, and it answers it makes sense of so many riddles that we wrestle with throughout our careers. The whole creative self-efficacy thing and the doubts we have at the start of a project and wondering if we've lost it, when we lose momentum and we haven't done the thing for a while, coming back to it. And all of that stuff is just so succinctly laid out by Zorana. So a massive thank you to Zorana Pringle for taking the time to talk. Get the book now. Big thank you to the founding sponsor of the show, Illustration X. You can see their global range of gorgeous illustration and animation portfolios now, as well as dig into all the great news sections and their great work they do for the creative industry at illustrationx.com. Thank you for listening, guys. I appreciate you as always. It is a joy to have you on board. Please tell a friend if you enjoyed this show. Point them in the right direction. That's how podcasts grow the most organically. If you get a chance to rate, review, subscribe, that would also mean the world. That is also wonderful golden support too. I hope you're enjoying this run of shows. Back to diary, I think, next week while I prepare for other guest episodes. We've got a burnout coach coming up on the show before too long. We'll be talking about the emotional side of creativity and why we get it mixed up with burnout and our definitions, but also what it means and how we can combat and mitigate against that sustainably. So any questions around that, hit me up, ben@bentalon.com, or on LinkedIn messages. I will pick that up too. Everything else I'm a bit sloppy at social media wise these days, so don't hold it against me. It was a personal decision to better enable my creativity so that my thoughts weren't going through an Instagram filter, if you know what I mean. Thanks for listening, guys. If you want to get in touch about working together through my coaching practice, do so now at thecreativecondition.com/coach. Everything else is also on there, free and affordable resources for your creativity. Have an awesome week, guys. Thank you for listening and take care.